Welcome back to the show, everybody. We have DeMore Tax Service, LLC with us today.
It's great to be here.
And we're diving into a topic that's really changing things up in the world of finance.
Yeah.
Central bank digital currencies?
CBDCs.
CBDCs.
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful.
Yeah.
But, what are they?
Well, think about it like this. You know how we have, physical cash
Right.
and we have, digital money in our bank accounts.
Hmm.
A CBDC would be like a third type of money
Oh, interesting.
issued by a country's central bank, but it's digital.
So it's like digital cash, basically.
Yeah, you could think of it that way, like a digital version of the dollar or the euro or whatever currency.
So instead of swiping your debit card or using Apple Pay,
Right.
it would be like using digital cash, but from the central bank.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea is that it would combine some of the best features of both physical cash and the digital money we have now.
So what would be some of those features? Like what makes them so special?
Well, our sources actually highlight, 6 key categories where both physical cash and the digital money we use now kind of fall short. Things like privacy, accessibility, safety, convenience, online payments, and costs. And they actually use a handy 3-star rating system to kind of illustrate this.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. I like that.
It's a good way to visualize, the strengths and weaknesses of each type of money.
So let's break that down a little bit more.
Sure.
So cash, we all know cash is great for privacy.
Absolutely.
Nobody's really tracking your every purchase when you use cash.
Right.
But it's not exactly convenient for online shopping.
No, not really. You can't really hand someone a $20 bill through the computer screen.
Not yet, at least.
Right.
And then there's digital money from private banks, which is super easy to use online.
Oh, yeah. Super convenient.
But then there's all those privacy trade-offs,
Absolutely. All that data that's being collected
Yeah.
about your spending habits and, who knows what else.
So it seems like these CBDCs are trying to address those concerns.
Yeah, that's the goal. They're trying to find that sweet spot,
Right.
Combine the convenience of digital payments with the privacy that you get with cash.
It's like the best of both worlds.
Exactly.
So what are some of the potential benefits that are being talked about?
Well, the sources lay out 6 main arguments in favor of CBDCs, and some of them are pretty compelling.
I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
Okay. So first up, privacy, which, we've already touched on.
Right.
The idea is that with a well-designed CBDC, you could potentially make payments without involving all those third-party companies
Okay.
that are currently, collecting and potentially selling your data.
Interesting. So no more worrying about, data breaches or who's, tracking my every
Yeah.
purchase.
Right. It would be much more private, potentially.
But how would that actually work? I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
Well, some proposals, like the digital euro,
Okay.
suggest, cutting out card companies completely and really limiting the amount of data that even central banks and governments have access to.
So more controls for the individual.
Exactly. More control over your own data.
I like that.
Yeah. And there's even been some talk of, offline CBDC payments, which would be similar to using like a physical debit card, but with even greater privacy.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Now, what about access to financial services? I know there's a lot of people out there that still don't have bank accounts for whatever reason.
Absolutely. And that's a huge issue. And CBDCs could potentially be a game changer in that area.
How so?
Well, they could provide, alternative ways to access digital money,
Yeah, right.
especially for people who are unbanked or, maybe they face challenges with traditional banking systems for whatever reason.
Right.
The Bahamas actually launched a CBDC called the Sand Dollar.
The sand dollar. I love that name.
It's a great name, right?
Yeah.
And they did this specifically to improve financial inclusion in, more remote communities.
Oh.
And so far, it's been pretty successful.
That's amazing. So we've got increased privacy, better access.
Mm-hmm.
What else is on this list of potential benefits?
Well, safety is a big one. CBDCs could potentially offer better protection against theft and loss and even financial instability.
Interesting.
Think about it. You can't lose a CBDC like you can lose, physical cash.
Right.
And it's not subject to the same risks as, a bank account held by a private institution that could potentially fail.
But wouldn't there still be a risk of hacking or cyber attacks with digital currencies?
Of course. I mean, any digital system has vulnerabilities,
Right.
but the idea is that a well-designed CBDC could incorporate, really robust security features,
Okay.
potentially making it even safer than the systems we use today.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've got privacy, accessibility, safety, and what about the cost of using a CBDC?
Well, this is where things get really interesting, especially for businesses like DeMore Tax Service.
Okay, tell me more.
One of the biggest potential benefits is the reduction of transaction costs.
Oh, okay.
By cutting out those intermediaries like card companies, CBDC transactions could be significantly cheaper for both merchants and consumers.
Oh, I can see how that would be a huge advantage, especially for small businesses and maybe international transactions.
Absolutely. Imagine sending money overseas without having to pay those, hefty fees.
Right.
There's a lot of excitement around, the potential for cheaper and more efficient cross-border payments with CBDCs.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and some central banks have even been experimenting with giving foreign banks direct access to their wholesale CBDCs
Oh, wow.
to kind of simplify and reduce the cost of international payments.
So that's like a pretty big shift in the global financial system.
It is, it is. It could potentially have, big implications for how money moves around the world.
Right. I mean, we're not just talking about saving a few bucks on transaction fees here. We're talking about like national sovereignty and global influence potentially.
You got it. And that's exactly what some of the sources point out.
That's fascinating. Now, what about innovation? Can CBDCs do more than just replicate our existing financial systems?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes. One of the most exciting things about this technology is the potential for what's called programmable money.
Programmable money. That sounds like something out of Star Trek.
It kind of does.
But break that down for me. What does that even mean?
So imagine payments that are automated based on certain conditions,
Okay.
or money that can be targeted for specific uses. So think about buying a house.
Okay.
Right now, you'd typically use an escrow service, which, involves fees to make sure that the seller gets paid once you receive the keys.
Right.
But with programmable money, you could automate that whole process.
Oh, wow.
The payment would only be released to the seller when certain conditions are met, like the transfer of ownership being recorded.
So it's like taking those smart contracts we're seeing in the crypto world and applying them to, everyday transactions.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. And that's just one example. The potential for innovation in finance with programmable money is huge.
Yeah, I can see that.
We could see things like automated tax payments, microloans with built-in repayment schedules,
Wow.
a whole ecosystem of new financial services built on this technology.
This is all incredibly exciting. But I know there are concerns about CBDCs as well.
Of course, every new technology has its potential downsides.
Right.
We'll definitely dive into those after a quick word from our sponsor, DeMore Tax Service, LLC.
Remember, they're your trusted partners for navigating the ever-evolving world of taxes in a digital age. You can find them online at DeMoreTaxService.com.
We'll be right back. So before the break, we were talking about all the potential benefits of CBDCs.
Yeah, it sounded pretty amazing.
Right. Cheaper transactions, better access, increased privacy. But like any new technology, there are some potential downsides.
Right, there's always a flip side.
Exactly. So we need to be aware of those risks and challenges.
For sure. So what are some of those concerns?
Well, one of the biggest worries is around implementation.
Okay, some experts argue that a poorly designed CBDC could end up being really clunky and less user-friendly.
Oh, I can see that. I mean, we've all had to deal with those like clunky government websites or apps.
Exactly. A CBDC would need to be really seamlessly integrated with our existing financial infrastructure and be intuitive enough for, everyone to use.
Right. Otherwise, it could be more trouble than it's worth.
Exactly. And then there's the question of, the impact on financial stability.
Right. I've heard some concerns about CBDCs like triggering bank runs.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. If people suddenly think a CBDC is safer than their bank deposits.
They might pull all their money out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that could, destabilize the whole financial system.
So how do we prevent that from happening?
Well, the sources suggest a few safeguards.
Okay.
One idea is to limit the amount of CBDC that individuals can hold.
Oh, okay. So like a cap on how much digital cash you can have.
Exactly,
Yeah.
to reduce the incentive to make those massive withdrawals.
That makes sense.
Right.
And there are other ideas too, like tiered remuneration rates, where the interest you earn on your CBDC decreases as your balance goes up.
So it encourages people to, keep some money in those traditional accounts.
Exactly. It's about striking that balance, encouraging CBDC adoption without totally disrupting the existing financial system.
Right. It's got to work with what we've got.
Exactly. But I think, maybe the most controversial issue around CBDCs is the potential for increased government control.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern I've heard a lot about.
Yeah, it's understandable. I
Yeah.
mean, if every transaction is recorded and traceable.
Your brother's watching.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not all. Remember programmable money.
Oh, yeah, that futuristic stuff.
Well, it has a lot of potential, but it also raises some concerns about, government overreach.
How so?
Well, imagine a scenario where a government could restrict spending on certain things,
Okay.
like certain goods or services, or even set expiration dates on your money.
So they could force you to spend it by a certain time.
Exactly. It sounds a little dystopian.
It does a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Exactly. Where the government controls every aspect of your life.
Right. So these are things we need to think about carefully.
Yeah, it's a tough balance.
It is. But the good news is, these concerns are being actively discussed and addressed in the development of, CBDC frameworks.
Okay, good.
A lot of the proposals emphasize things like privacy-enhancing technologies and data minimization.
So like limiting the amount of data that's collected and making sure it's used for the right reasons.
Exactly. And there's a lot of talk about, the need for independent oversight and transparency to prevent, abuse.
Right. We don't want these things to be used for the wrong purposes.
Exactly. Remember the initial proposal for the digital euro?
Yeah.
There were some concerns about, phasing out cash and limiting privacy.
Right.
But they revised those proposals based on feedback from the public.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Right. Public discourse had a real impact on shaping those proposals to be more democratic and privacy conscious.
That's encouraging. It shows that we have a voice in how these systems are designed.
Absolutely. The more people understand about CBDCs, the better we'll be able to, navigate this new world and advocate for systems that really work for us.
Right. It's about making sure these new forms of money are used for good and not for control and surveillance.
Exactly. And speaking of navigating the complex world of finance, I can't think of a better partner than DeMore Tax Service, LLC.
Absolutely. They're experts at helping people and businesses stay ahead of the curve when it comes to taxes.
They really are. And I'm sure they'll be an invaluable resource as we enter this new era of digital currencies.
So if you're looking for guidance on how CBDCs might impact your taxes, or you just need help understanding all this, be sure to reach out to DeMore Tax Service, LLC.
Absolutely. They have a ton of resources on their website, DeMoreTaxService.com.
And their team of experts is always there to answer your questions.
Always happy to help.
This has been a really fascinating look into the world of CBDCs.
It is.
We've covered so much from the potential for cheaper transactions and increased financial inclusion,
Right.
to the concerns about privacy and government control.
It's a complex topic.
It is. And we've only just scratched the surface.
But hopefully this discussion has given you a better understanding of what CBDCs are and how they might affect your life.
Exactly.
And why it's so important to stay informed and engaged as this technology continues to evolve.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave you with a thought to ponder. Imagine a world where your digital wallet isn't just for making payments,
Okay.
but it's also a platform for accessing all kinds of financial services, all powered by this CBDC technology.
That's interesting.
What possibilities do you see? What concerns come to mind? The future of money is being written right now,
That's true.
and we all have a role to play in shaping it.
For sure.
Huge thank you to DeMore Tax Service, LLC for joining us for this deep dive into the world of digital currencies.
It's been a pleasure.
For all your tax needs, don't forget to visit them online at DeMoreTaxService.com.
And thank you for listening to Let's Talk Taxes podcast.
It really is fascinating to think about, where money's going to go from here
Oh, yeah.
with all this new technology.
Definitely.
But, as we dig deeper into this world of digital currencies,
Yeah.
it's clear that CBDCs have the potential to change so much.
Yeah.
Not just how we, pay for things, but also how we think about money.
Absolutely. I think, we've been focusing a lot on a, practical side of things, like
Right.
cheaper payments, better access security.
Yeah.
But there's also this philosophical side.
Right. What does it mean for a government to have this much control over a currency?
Exactly.
How do we balance individual freedom with the need for, regulations and oversight?
Big questions.
Big questions.
So as we kind of wrap up our, exploration of this topic,
Yeah.
what are some of the key things you think our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, I think first and foremost, CBDCs are still pretty new. They're still developing.
Yeah. No major economy has fully launched a retail CBDC yet.
So it's a lot of wait and see.
It is. Things could change really quickly.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Definitely. And also, I think the way a CBDC is designed and implemented is going to be crucial.
Right.
A well-designed one could promote financial inclusion, lower costs, and make things more secure.
Right.
But a poorly designed one could have the opposite effect. Privacy violations, financial instability, even increased inequality.
Right. So it's not just about the technology itself, but how it's used.
Exactly.
Now, we've talked a lot about, the potential risks of government control and surveillance.
Right.
Are there any historical examples that kind of help us understand how this might play out?
That's a great question. I think it's helpful to look back at how governments have reacted to other big technological changes.
Okay.
Think about the internet.
Right.
At first, everyone was so excited about it.
It was going to connect the world.
Yeah, democratize information.
Right.
And to a large extent, it did that. But there have also been some negative consequences.
Right, like misinformation.
Exactly. And online surveillance.
So it's a double-edged sword.
It is. So I think as we move forward with CBDCs, it's really important to learn from the past.
Right.
And try to be proactive about mitigating those risks.
So we don't repeat those mistakes.
Exactly. We need to be having these open and honest conversations about, how to use this technology responsibly and ethically.
Right. And hold our policymakers accountable.
Absolutely.
For making sure that CBDCs are designed in a way that protects individual rights and freedoms.
That's so important.
It is. And, it's encouraging to see that these discussions are already happening.
Oh, yeah?
In a lot of countries. The revisions to the digital euro proposal, for example,
Right.
really shows how public pressure can lead to, better, more democratic design.
Absolutely. The more people understand about CBDCs, the better equipped we'll be to advocate for systems that work for us.
It's a call to action for all of us to, stay informed and engage in this conversation.
Definitely. And, demand transparency and accountability from our leaders.
Yeah, exactly. And as always, when it comes to navigating the complex world of finance and taxes, DeMore Tax Service, LLC, is here to help.
Absolutely.
They are the experts at understanding how these new developments might impact your financial well-being.
Whether you're an individual or a business, they can provide the guidance and support you need.
So be sure to check out their website, DeMoreTaxService.com.
It's a great resource.
It is. And on that note, I want to thank DeMore Tax Service, LLC, for joining us for this deep dive into the world of digital currencies.
It's been a pleasure.
It has. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk Taxes podcast.
We'll see you next time.